street, they were completely rammed. They were filled up to the gunnels, they were queuing down the street. They said, you should have been here last week. I swear, you should have been here last week. Oh yeah, you should have been here last week.
Hello and welcome to another edition of You Should Have Been Here Last Week, the podcast presented by myself, Steve Gribbin, and fellow comedian Paul Ricketts. There he is down there, wherever. And in this podcast, we interview prominent performers and promoters and indeed artists who make up the kaleidoscopic cornucopia that is the beauty of the British comedy milieu.
Oh my goodness.
So this week we have as our guest on the podcast the stand-up comedian, writer, performer, panel show goddess, and indeed qualified virologist, the marvellous Ria Lina.
So today, as our guest, we have Ria Lina, and obviously she has appeared on TV, radio, as well as many stages, renowned comic. But today we're not going to talk about that. Well, we are a bit, but we're going to sort of focus on touring, which seems to be a big thing now amongst comedians, to sort of making a choice to go on the touring route rather than doing the clubs as a way to get more success and build up an audience, which of course, naturally you've gone into this due to your TV appearances over the last couple of years. I suppose the first question I'm going to ask about this, what's the big difference between touring and doing normal club circuit?
Touring's an interesting one. The main difference is the stress levels, because you're selling tickets off your own name. So when you go on the circuit, people go, will you come and do this slot for this amount of money? You say yes. And in theory, no matter what happens at the gig, you get that money. Whether two people show up, whether it sells out, you get what you agreed. There are times where people cancel a circuit gig, and they go, yeah, I can't pay you because the gig didn't happen. You go, I'm afraid that's not quite how contracts work. We have an agreement that if I'm willing and able to show up and do the job, that you pay me regardless of how many tickets you sold. But that's a totally different conversation and could probably take us a month by itself. A whole episode by itself just to discuss it. But
I've got a big list of the people who do that. Anyway, carry on.
But when you tour, you're obviously banking on your own name. It's basically like doing Edinburgh. I think people who've ever been to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival or any festival know that when you're going there, you're going to go see an artist do a show in their own name. And so therefore they eat according to how many people come to see the show. And it's the same thing, but we just do it, all across the country over a series of weeks or months. And by the end of it, if you've done it right, you have an ulcer.
There's that thing when you're doing an Edinburgh show, isn't there, as well? And you can't stop yourself from... I got told off one year by the guy that was running my show for standing outside counting the people coming in before the show had started. And that was all I could think about.
No.
I know, it's a bad thing.
I don't understand. What's wrong with counting your audience?
Well, I should have been concentrating on getting ready for the show, but I was like already at the beginning of the show going, oh, Christ, 23.
23? Sorry, can we pause on how Steve's panicking about having 23 at an Edinburgh Fringe show?
Yeah. Do you know what, Ria? I deliberately chose a higher number than was actually true.
But I think the thing about number counting, especially in an Edinburgh show, is it just puts you off. I've even seen acts who come up on stage and I can see them in the first minute of their show just scanning across the rows going, less than the 12 I need to make my money back. So it's just...
You can't make your money back with 12, given... I mean, the expenses are insane. By the time you've paid to get into the brochure, which if people don't know this, it's 300 quid just to be listed in the brochure. Then you need to in some way rent the room. I know that there's free festivals and free fringes, but those are now coming with modicum but upfront costs. And then you've got your PR, pay for your flyers, your flyerers, your accommodation in Edinburgh. And it's a similar sort of process with touring, upfront touring. You've got, you book all of the rooms. If you're lucky, those deals will be on a ticket split. So you'll agree to split the cost of tickets. So you're not having an upfront cost, but then some venues will say, but it'll cost this much to go in our mail out, this much to go in our brochure, this much, if you want us to do a flyer drop in the local area. Everybody will want a certain number of flyers and posters. So you're buying all of that up front. You are, PR, if you're going to hire someone to help you get local press attention, to get bums on seats, that will have upfront costs. How are you going to get there? All of your train costs, your accommodation. If you've done it smart, and my tour managers are brilliant. I'm working with Little Wander, and they're absolutely brilliant. So every week it's a run of gigs, but in a similar area. Like I have a Southwest run, and then I come back, and I have a Yorkshire run, and then I come back, which really saves on costs. So instead of going from London to Yorkshire and back again, and then the next day to Dorchester, and then the next day to Taunton, it's all very sensibly laid out. But I've seen people's listings, when they publish, here's my tour, and you go, you're zigzagging across the country day after, in 1 week. Who booked this? Who booked this? I had only one in my last run of tours where they booked me in Leeds and then Kendal. And if you look on a map, it seems to make sense because they're both in the north and they're quite close to each other. But if you look at it from a public transport point of view, there is nothing that crosses the moors that gets you from Leeds to Kendal. So you actually have to go down to something like Sheffield, across to, or down into the Midlands, across and then up again to get to the Lake District. And so that was the only crazy link that I had in the last one. But these are all the things that go into it before you've even sold a single ticket. So
you got the costs.
Mm-hmm.
You also you just touched on it, the travel. So have you doing your tour by train?
This one I'm not. So the last one I did 21 dates last year, and I did it all by myself, and I did it by public transport, and it broke me. My goodness, it broke me. So this time, I'm very much, I've basically, this is another cost. I'm going to have a tour manager, and we're going to lease a car, and he's going to drive me everywhere. But I looked at sort of the cost analysis of it. It's similar to having a tour opener. If you have someone who opens for you on tour, which I don't because my show's 90 minutes, so I do both 45-minute halves by myself. But if you have a tour opener, the idea is, you pay them to do a quick 20-minute set in the first half. They drive you there and back, and then you have, a bit of company as well. So I've opted for a tour manager and a merch table.
Yeah.
So like I can do 20 minutes of comedy in the first half, but what I can't do is sell T-shirts in the interval. So that's the plan.
I mean, we could talk about the artistic difference as well, isn't it? Because there is, you've got to write. Does the show if you're touring, does it have to have a theme? Does that help?
I think this is where we get into the nuts and bolts of stand-up, isn't it? And the artistry of it, and where it is actually an art. You can do an hour of funny stand-up at a tour, and I don't think audience members are going to leave going, "Oh, I didn't feel closure at the end of that. All I did was laugh." I don't think that's ever going to be a criticism from a ticket-paying audience member. But if you want critical acclaim, or if you want, to be considered for Netflix or an Amazon special, the rest of it, I think there does have to be a little bit more art to it. But I think it's important to say there is a huge difference. In my opinion, there's a huge difference between a tour show and an Edinburgh show. And I think they're two different things. I think to have a theme, to have an arc. Yes, I just saw Ed Byrne last night, and he did do his show in Edinburgh, and then he took it on tour. But he very much had a message and a theme that he was sticking to. But it was a tour show, so I think the show was about an hour and 20 minutes, which is obviously long. Edinburgh shows tend to be 55, 60 minutes because everything in Edinburgh is an hour-long slot, so you're rarely getting longer than that. Edinburgh shows tend to have a real pathos moment, at about 40 minutes where they just go, and then he died, in order to just wake up the Edinburgh audience who is watching their fourth show of the day.
Yeah, because the theme of death is quite a common one in Edinburgh shows, isn't it?
Death or your ADHD diagnoses. I think that's sort of the themes that we're seeing these days.
Death or ADHD, you decide.
So I think a tour show is definitely different. I think this is my first tour, so I'm very aware that it's an introductory tour. I'm getting, people are coming to see me sometimes, as in the case of, I think, 100% of the Cardiff audience, only 66% of whom actually showed up to the show, came to see me
Wow.
because, if you put your tickets on sale a year in advance,
Mm.
people forget that they've bought them, or when the
Wow.
date comes, they go, "Oh, we have those tickets, but we also have, the kids' school play is tonight," or the life gets in the way, life happens. And so there's always, I found that on average about, I'd say between 10 and 20% of advanced sales don't show up. But in Cardiff, it was 30%. And in a room that only held, it was between 80 and 100 seats. It was a small little theater. It was a cute room, and I'd done a gig in there a couple months prior, which was lovely. So I was really looking forward to it. It's a great art center. And we'd sold out fairly quickly. And in fact, there was a bit of a waiting list, and then 30% of the people didn't show up. So the room felt empty. It really felt, it felt unsuccessful, even though I was standing there going, I know I've sold out.
I mean, in a sense, though, it's part of the bargain that you've had to strike to get the people to come in the first place. You have to be seen on the TV, don't you?
It's exactly how I negotiated co-hosting Pointless. I said, look, I'll do this because I need the ticket sales, but and they went, oh, all right then. No, I think I love how you phrase it as if it was a bargain. Genuinely, they came to me and said, will you do this? I was like,
I mean, how much would you say that social media is? Because you're a big and very, very skillful user of social media. How much would you say that contributes to the success or not of it all?
I think that's very much depending on where you stand. Thank you for thinking that I am a big and successful user of social media. I can tell you, though, when I look to other accounts, I go, wow, those are big and very successful users of social media.
Yeah.
I wish I could be like them. Social media is a necessary evil, isn't it, of what we're doing now. What's happened in technology in the last sort of 20 years has forced comedians to learn skills that none of us wanted to learn. We never wanted to learn how to edit or look what we're doing now. We're recording a podcast and Paul's going to go away and successfully audio edit, which is again, nothing that we used to, it was never a string to our bows. In the old days, it used to be a little bit more of a meritocracy before television and before the internet, where you just had to get on stage and be funny. And then the TV producers would come and go, it is your turn. You are now sit in the light, and you'd get on TV, and then that's it. Your future was made. And we can see that. We can see generationally people's careers according to when they got famous. I mean, there was a bit of a bottleneck that happened, and I don't know exactly when, but there was a bottleneck that happened maybe, let's say, before the pandemic hit, where up to that point where we had 5 TV channels and people kind of just watched a little bit of cable, and the streamers were just starting to come in. If you made it on television before that point, you were in everybody's minds, you were in everybody's living rooms. And when Live at the Apollo first started 18, 19 years ago, if you did that, that's it. You were selling DVDs at Christmas. Whereas now there's so many choices of what to watch, including YouTube clips, not just Netflix and not just Amazon and not just that BBC iPlayer isn't the draw, isn't the pull that it used to be. People don't sit and watch television on a Saturday. They sit down and they watch whatever they want to on a Saturday. So just because you've done Apollo doesn't mean that you will sell out your next tour as it used to. And it also means that getting from stage 1 of television entry, which is, okay, you've guessed it on Mock the Week or you've guessed it on Live at the Apollo, doesn't mean that you'll get to stage 2. And stage 2 is where they go, we have a program. We have this new format and it's perfect. It's perfect for Steve Gribbin. We must get him hosting. And in the old days, they go, who's Steve Gribbin? And they'll go, he's this great comic. He does these fabulous songs, topical songs, and he's perfect to host this show. And they'll go, great, let's give him a go. Now they'll go, nobody knows Steve Gribbin. They won't watch the show. Yeah. Let's give it to, let's give it to Catherine Ryan. And they'll go, Catherine Ryan's great, but this show doesn't suit her. It doesn't matter. If she'll say, yes, we want her because people will watch because it's Catherine Ryan. And don't get me wrong, she's wonderful. And I know that she also work, if stuff comes her way, she's like, yes, I must say yes, because we're all wired to say yes to everything that comes in, because we never know when the next offer is going to come in or when it's going to stop. But that means that because now we are people led instead of program led, it's much harder for anybody in the block that I'm in to just, it's much harder to push through to the next level, because taking a chance on a new person, it isn't financially viable for any of the channels anymore.
It's interesting the answer you just gave, because that chimes with we've interviewed Stephen Grant, and he said a very similar thing. Said that like 5 years ago, people going, "This is it. The internet is a meritocracy. It's a level playing field, etc., etc." But he said, but what people didn't take account of is the fact that millions of people would then pile into this new area, and the fragmentation, as you've just said, is huge, and there's consequently more and more people pouring into that space. So it's harder to get any traction, and it's in fact a lot of the time it can be a pure matter of chance. Like the hot water video that made Paul Smith famous. I've spoken to him about this. Was one where he took the piss out of a pair of trainers that someone was wearing, and within weeks it had got like 1 million views. And to this day, he still doesn't know why.
The thing about the internet is that that's the only place we have left. That's the only meritocracy left for us to get coverage is the internet, is to hope that we can get to a point where our follower count means that they can't ignore you on the more traditional platforms. And that's what they're looking at now. You were never able to quantify someone's success before social media. They just went, she's funny, we're going to put her on telly. Oh, she's still funny, we're going to keep putting her on telly. Or he's really good. Now you can literally go, how successful is Ria Lina? Well, you just go and look across my platforms, add up all the numbers and go, oh, not as successful as a road comic in the US. Road comics in the US have higher follower counts than all of us. And they've not done telly and they've not done anything, but they're touring around and playing to an audience of 350 million people. And we have a country of 70 million people. What's good over there? What's good over here is nothing over there. And they're decent comics. I'm watching them, I'm following them, but I'm looking at their credits going, I have more television credits than some of the road comics, but they have 100K followers on Instagram because they're just exposed to more people over time. And also they're exposed to an audience like, if you do the college circuit over there, they're all on Insta, they're all going to follow you after a gig. And so now that we're able to actually be quantified, it's a lot harder to just go, but I'm really funny. They go, yeah, but the world doesn't think so, does it?
Yeah, but the thing is, don't you think that there are different mediums, aren't they? So someone could be.
It's cliffhanger every time he freezes. It's a cliffhanger.
I know.
Sorry. They're different mediums, basically. So you've seen this now. This is a phenomenon that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years of so-called influencers, making their way onto the UK comedy circuit. And many of them have not got the chops to do it properly. They live comedy, as it were. They're just a bit worried about the fact that somebody can be really, really, really funny, and then if it doesn't translate.
I'm saying the powers that be are the audience that buy those tickets. So let's say you've got someone who's a sketch comic. They do short little 60 to 90 second videos on Instagram and TikTok. They build up a following of 250,000 or 1 million people. They now can sell live tickets to a live tour, and they're going to sell out that tour. And maybe even it's a mid-level tour. Maybe they're playing 1,000 or 2,000 seater venues. That's good money to you and me. If we got 70% of a sold out 1,000-seater venue, that's us for a month, that money. But what you have to remember is that people follow people now. So if they love that person for what they do, they will love them when they're human on stage and trying to get better. They will love them just to be in the same room as them. They will love them if they do a meet and greet afterwards, and they will buy tickets to the next one. That audience is captured. That's a captured audience. And so we can sit here and go, oh, but they're not as good at the live craft as we are after we've done it for, a dozen years. But if the tickets are sold, then the money is had. I think that's the frustrating thing, that that the connection isn't between talent and money anymore, that you automatically go, well, the best people, it used to be that. And that's kind of that old mind frame from the 90s into the 2000s. It was pretty much trickle to the top and get to the next level. It was a fairly steady progression for, I would say, 80 to 90% of the comics in the industry, is that you just sort of trickle up. And there are people now working now whom I greatly respect, who were headliners when I started, and they're still headliners today, because we also don't have the drop off that we used to have. Like when I first started, all of the headliners, they were the headliners. There was no one above them. There was no one like retired. There was no one above them. And here we are, and they're still the headliners. So we haven't had the throughput of, people moving on that we used to have. We just have more and more people starting at the beginning.
So there needs to be either a cull at the bottom or a cull at the top. Something's
Yes, that's really what I came on this podcast to say, is that we need to cull. There needs to be a cull. No, but what I'm saying is that it is now, I mean, when you say what is success, you can't just go, I was the funniest on the bill. Success is usually always, bottom line, a monetization issue. And if by getting 1 million people on Instagram, you can monetize a live tour, then that has to be seen as success, even if that tour isn't as funny, quote, as funny as what any of us might put on tour. It's, how can you argue that their sold out tour isn't a success? Do you know what I mean? And they will get better. The smart ones will get better. We see that all the time. People who get success before they're ready for it, but they're smart, they work hard, and then and they're given all the chances. That's what's the most frustrating thing, is when they're not ready for it and they're given enough chances to get good at it. And then you go, oh, I would have been good from the first chance.
So Paul Smith, when you think about it, of course, has hardly got any TV credits at all.
Yeah.
But selling out a really big tour based on followers. Because I think what you're saying is, what's more important here is getting the followers. Once you've got your followers and built up a huge amount of them, of course you can do your tour. In a strange sort of way, that is circumventing TV, gatekeepers of all of that, and he's doing it independently.
Well, you say gatekeepers, but actually he's doing it the new way. Maybe that is the new way.
Yeah,
Daniel Fox, fabulous. He's a new comic, but with already a great track record of writing musicals, and successful in his own right in that regard. But he was doing sketches online, and he ended up with 250,000 across, he's got, I think, at least, if not more by now, 250,000 on TikTok, 250,000 on Insta. So as a new comic, he was able to sell out his work in progress tours before he went on tour. And I'm like, well, how many of us are desperate for work in progress stage time while we work out a show for Edinburgh or work out a show for tour, as I was doing, going, hang on a second, just by doing that, he's able to say to them honestly, hey, thank you so much for your support. This is me vulnerable and working stuff out. And then I'm going to take it on tour. So they're coming twice. So he's not needing the circuit at all for that. He's self-sufficient, and it, absolutely brilliant. But it also means that because he can do that, he's going to exponentially increase his ability to improve, because he has access to all of that stage time.
Yeah. Well, that answered my question then.
Yeah. Do you need to go and do some Instagram videos?
No.
I get it. It's frustrating because, again, our mindset is, listen, if you, a promoter, put on a gig and you hire us to come and do our job is to show up and do the gig. Your job is to fill the room with punters. Yeah. Now, some promoters would argue, but if I book you and you have TV credits, or if you want the gig to go well, it's in your interest to reshare the gig so that people show up and see the gig and see, and come and buy tickets. And there's been this age-old debate between comedians and promoters as to whose job it is to promote the gig. And again, at the end of the 90s, it was 100%. I think it was 100% the promoter's job, because there was no social media. If you want to put posters up around the neighborhood, if you're going to do a flyer drop, however you're going to advertise that is on you, because I'm not getting a ticket split. I'm just getting a lump sum, and I'm going to get that money whether you sell out or not. And if you sold out, clearly you've made a good amount of money, probably more than me. So it was always 100% on the promoter. But now we're in this fuzzy area of going, well, you should be retweeting. Now, from my point of view as an act, if I retweeted every gig I did in a year between the three of us, I mean, think about it, you're probably doing 300 gigs a year, whatever it is, every weekend. That's minimum. If you just do Friday, Saturday, that's 104 gigs that you're retweeting. Your followers don't want to see 104 retweets of gigs. They want valuable content. They're following you for you. They're not following you to find out the one time a year that you're near them. Obviously, they want to know that. But if you only have 2,000 followers, you need to keep them happy. Otherwise, they'll unfollow you. So I'm not going to be some gigs retweet. Some gigs start promoting 2 months in advance, and then they'll text me and go, "Hi, could you please retweet and I go, "Listen, do you know how many gigs I have between now and your gig? I have to do them in order, and I have to then balance that out with other content. But otherwise, I'm just going to be spamming my audience, and they will switch off. So if you want my audience who lives near you to come to your gig, you're going to have to wait your turn. And on the week of the gig, I will let them know I'm in their area. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that, but it's a real bugbear now as to whose job it is to push things.
Can I ask as well? I just wanted to ask this question about the difference between, because you are on. I know you don't say you're not, but you are on social media a lot, and you're saying that they're following you for you. Is there an issue there of, because it's relentless, isn't it? You have to keep tweeting or keep posting on social media.
I am on there a lot in comparison to you, definitely. I go through phases myself. Which is, again, this is a mental health thing. There are phases where I feel capable of sharing, and I'll do that. And there are times where I don't want to talk to anyone. And there are periods of time where I don't. I think if you followed me over time, you would see that it's actually peaks and troughs. So it seems constant. But I don't see, so if I'm, sharing a gig, so if I will share all gigs that I'm at. I decided a long time ago that it was in my interest to let people know where I am, because that's how you maintain an audience, is to say, hey, I'm near you. We're only in Portsmouth maybe once or twice a year. So if your fans from Portsmouth miss that gig, they're going to be gutted. So give them every opportunity to see it. That being said, the number of times that I've had someone message me the week after I've been in their city and go, hey, when are you next in this city? And I'll be like, last week. And especially my tour dates where they went, oh, I missed that. When did that happen? I was like, last year. I put my tour tickets on sale last year. I have been coming to your city for a year. You missed me by a week. I can't. And they're like, oh, but I keep checking your website. I'm like, you clearly haven't checked my website. But I promise you 110 other people knew that I was coming last week because they showed up to the gig. So there is, I will promote every gig. What I try and do is add a little bit of content. So when I can't give of myself because, mental exhaustion and mental health and the rest of it, I will just retweet. There are times where I just go, I'm just going to bed. It's 1 a.m. retweet, but I do my best to share it with a quote. It's, you can quote share something. I try my best to go, hey folks, I'm down in Worthing. Hope you're worth it. Whatever. Just something to say I am consciously behind this retweet so that they know that I am putting myself, that I'm putting part of myself there instead of just a mindless retweet. But I do go through phases.
Okay,
so there will be phases where you will see me tweet my dinner and tweet you what I'm cooking. And then there will be whole weeks, if not a couple of weeks, where I go, I just can't face it. And I think that that's legitimate because I think mental health wise, being on there all the time, also how much you give of yourself. I've never, ever I think when I did a show, no, that's not true. 10 years ago, I did a show called School of Reason, and it was about homeschooling my children. And so my children were in that promo and were in that campaign. But other than that, like as a day-to-day, I don't post my children. I don't go, I might say that I'm with my children. I might say, hey, I took my kids to Leeds Castle, but I don't post a selfie with my children. So if my children are walking down the street, you would not be able to go, that's Ria Lina's kid. That's kind of up to them, and they're not old enough. They're not old enough yet to make that decision. And actually, none of them, they all have social media accounts. And to my knowledge, none of them have ever posted public pictures of themselves. And whether that's because they're just not minded to do it, or whether that's because they've actively seen my life and my social media and have therefore shied away from it on purpose, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So when you get into a touring situation, does that mean that you go into social media overdrive?
Well, actually, that's funny you say that. I'm just thinking now about ways of providing content without being boring. If you know, so I am about to go on tour, which actually gives me a lot more time to create content. And one of the things I don't do a lot of pieces to camera. So you see that I'm on social media a lot, but you don't see me going, "Hey folks, I'm just backstage and I'm just doing this." I'm not comfortable with that. I don't do it a lot. If I do it, I tend to do it for my subscribers behind the paywall on Instagram. I'm just a little more comfortable speaking to them that way. But I'm trying to think, how can I bring people on tour with me, which could be fun, but how do I make that fun rather than make that like, oh, she's in another. And I've seen some wonderful ideas from people. Reese James, I think, did this lovely thing where every dressing room he went into, he read the letter of the act that was before him who left him a note, and it would just be like, "Dear Reese, I hope you have a lovely time here. I left some of my costumes for you. Love, Madonna," or whatever it was. But, and it was always a letter from somebody outrageous, and that was a really cute little thing that he did that I thought was fun. It's I saw another friend of mine who was actually on a theater tour, and in every venue that she went to, she had a little countdown of how many days were left, and so that was cute as well.
Ria Lina, thanks for talking to us this morning, because it actually is the morning, and we recommend that you go and see her tour. The picture is behind her.
Ria Lina, Reawakening, 53 dates across the UK and Ireland on my website.
So that was Ria Lina. Interesting discussion there about touring and especially social media and the responsibilities of comedians to promote themselves. So much as this show has been about talking to promoters, comedians, we're all promoters. That's what we do. We have to provide content.
Yes. And in the words of Bill Hicks, it's relentless, isn't it? So every single day, every single minute of every day, we are have to provide something for people to latch onto. It's kind of depressing in a way.
No, it's only depressing because we're of a certain age that we haven't grown up with this as teenagers. So we find this extra onerous activity, whereas a younger person, this is what you grow up with and this is what you used to. And in a way, it's a wake-up call to us. We're going to say, look, got to join in. You can't avoid it.
I think it's... I do sound like an old fart, but the health dangers of it as well are not sort of fully realised, of being totally plugged into social media all the time. What's wrong with reading a book?
Yeah, says man talking on podcast.
Yeah, I know.
What's wrong with just ignoring this podcast? Getting a book out.
But that was very interesting. She's always very... she thinks about these things a lot, Ria. And she's got some some really good insights. I think that's an interesting way of saying as well, don't just think about the content, but think about different ways of presenting it so that it doesn't become boring, Yeah,
it's quality of content. You just can't just retweet stuff willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly, I like that.
I'm a big fan of willy-nilly. This show is a big fan of willy-nilly. And in fact, we're going to do a separate show, The Lives and Times of Willy-Nilly.
Willy-Nilly. That could actually be a great podcast, Willy-Nilly.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a children's show, but it's actually an adult show. Where are you going, Willy?
I don't know. Oh, that's so typical of you. You're Willy-Nilly. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Tell your friends, spread it by the old-fashioned method, in the real world of telling people that you like it.
You can post on social media about it.
Yes.
Yes, I will be.
Please post any praise of the programme to willynilly.com.
Yes, we're going to set up a new email for willy-nilly fans. Send your pictures of willy-nilly. As always, it's left to me to say all the big promotional stuff about, if you'd like to share with your friends, notifications, like, share, and also just spread the good news about you should have been here last week.
Look, if you do enjoy listening to this podcast and indeed watching it, please sign your name in blood and become a member of our new cult, as it were. Come every week, every fortnight, be one of our supplicants.
Well, actually, you can't come every week. You have to come the week before, as the title dictates.
Oh, yes, that's true, actually, yeah. Because, in fact, the people that came the week before you came, there was a lot more of them, yeah.
So, subscribers, our message to you is you should have subscribed last week. That's what we're saying to you.
That's it. That's the line. Oh, God.
They said you should have been here last week. I swear you should have been here last